Riot has not shied away from issuing massive changes to start Season 14, and they're back at it again in 14.4 with a plethora of meta-shifting adjustments. As always, you know we've got you guys covered with a complete rundown of the changes and an update on the solo queue tier list for every single role, thanks to the help of our challenger players and analyzing the most recent data. Don't forget to subscribe as well if you haven't already, as we'll be sure to keep you guys in the loop throughout Season 14 with a brand new update on the tier list every single week. Also, we're excited to announce we've done a massive update adding all brand new courses for Season 14 on our website, SkillCapped.com. And if that's not enough, we upload 10 new Smurf commentaries every week where a challenger teaches you how to play every champion in the exact rank you're stuck in. The best part? You can try all this out completely risk-free. If you don't rank up while actively using SkillCapped, you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below to get the rank you've always wanted in Season 14. Let's start the video off by covering all the item and rune adjustments along with a few other miscellaneous changes. Black Cleaver is buffed in 14.4 with its shred cap being increased from 24 to 25%, while the max stacks is dropping from 6 to 5. So you'll now be stacking Black Cleaver faster and even getting 1% extra shred at full stacks. A few champions who will benefit the most from these buffs are Urgot, Gnar, Lee Sin, Vi, Rek'Sai, Illaoi, and Kled. Riot's trying to speed up the pace of the game a tad in 14.4 as Fountain health regeneration is going up. The rate is being increased from 8.4 to 10.4% max health per second. Malignants, Archangels, and Luden's Companion will all receive the exact same buff, with their ability haste being increased from 20 to 25. Champions that like to stack 2 or more of these items will be winning out the most from these buffs, and one champ we're really high on for 14.4 is Kassadin. Ravenous Hydra is receiving a buff this patch, with its active now benefiting from 150% of your lifesteal. Most common Ravenous users in previous patches have been Fiora, Camille, Olaf, and Trundle, so they'll be the most positively influenced by this change. We've got Stridebreaker buffs for a second patch in a row, with its passive movement speed now applying even if the damage is mitigated. The active movement speed decay is being increased, going from 1.5 to 3 seconds. You can expect Garen, Bel'Veth, Set, Olaf, and Darius to benefit from these changes the most. Terminus will receive a few buffs for this patch, with its stat cap being reduced from 5 to 3. The pen that you receive at max stacks is not changing though, so you'll now just get that max value much faster now. The max armor and magic resist you get is being changed so that you receive slightly more value early on, but just one less armor and MR later in the game. Lots of champions that can look to take advantage of these buffs, as Kai'Sa, Kalista, Vayne, Kindred, Kog'Maw, Varus, Bel'Veth, and Ashe are the most notable. The lone nerf to items or runes for patch 14.4 is going the way of Lethal Tempo. You'll now have much less value from Lethal Tempo early on in the game, but it's going to become stronger later on. Champions that want to duel early in lane will be hit the hardest by this change, so we expect for Yone, Tryndamere, Yasuo, Jax, and Trundle to be losing some strength. Riot will be making a bunch of adjustments to support items for this patch, with the charge rate on your gold proc going from 18 to 20 seconds. The first charge, however, will now be coming in slightly earlier in the game at 1 minute and 50 seconds instead of 2 minutes and 8 seconds. The Blood Song support upgrade is going to be nerfed yet again, with its range damage amp being lowered from 6 to 5%. This change will affect Senna and Bard the most, as they've been abusing Blood Song really well in recent patches. The Solstice Slay support upgrade is being toned down a notch as well, with its heal being changed from a flat 120 to now scaling off 7% max health. Movement speed from Solstice Slay is being changed as well, going from 90 flat to now 30%. The movement speed duration is down from 4 to 3 seconds. Almost all melee supports have been running Solstice in recent patches, so they'll be seeing a slight drop in power for 14.4. Even enchanters like Janna have been favoring Zax's Realm Spike over Dreammaker in recent patches, so Riot's nerfing Realm Spike to hopefully increase the priority of Dreammaker. The base damage is dropping, while the AP ratio and max health damage are being increased. Cooldown will be 1 second less early in the game. All your mage supports will be affected by these changes and have less bully power in lane, while certain enchanters like Janna, Karma, Seraphine, and Nami will be dropping in power as well. Let's move on to covering the top lane changes now, as we've got Jace lined up for a couple of buffs. Base AD is going up from 57 to 59. Melee W mana restore is being increased by 5 at all ranks, while W damage per tick is also going up by 5 at all ranks. Melee E will see a quality of life change to where it will be more consistent. Buffs are okay, but nothing that really stands out to propel Jace significantly up the tier list. For now, we'll be leaving Jace in the top lane C tier. Another C tier top laner from recent patches is buffed for 14.4, as we have some changes for Renekton. Q champion healing is going up, but only at the later ranks. E cooldown is being reduced, but once again, it's just at the later ranks where it will be affected. R bonus health is seeing a buff at all ranks, with it being more significantly buffed at max rank. Considering the Q and E buffs don't help Renekton's first few levels out at all, we don't see these buffs going very far for a champion who's more early game reliant. Like Jace, we'll be leaving Renekton down in the top lane C tier for the time being. Now these next set of buffs actually look pretty impactful, as Volibear will receive a few adjustments. Q movement speed is going from 8 all the way up to 12% at rank 1. E cooldown is dropping by 1 second. R cooldown is being reduced by a whole 30 seconds at rank 1. The one nerf being thrown in is to the turret disable duration of Volibear R, and it will be lowered by 1 second. All in all, the straight up skirmish power of Volibear becomes much more reliable moving forward, and especially with that R buff, you'll be able to push your advantages much quicker than before. We've had Volley in the top lane C tier for a while, but he's getting a considerable push out for 14.4, moving up into the top lane A tier. Riot overshot a little with the 14.3 Alawi changes, so they're circling back with some nerfs in 14.4. Tentacle damage is being changed so that the base damage is up, but the total AD ratio is dropping from 115 to 100%. A pretty substantial nerf here, especially since it's a total AD ratio and not a bonus AD ratio. Since Alawi has been massively overperforming in 14.3, we're going to leave her in the OP tier despite this nerf, but if the change ends up too harsh, we may have to adjust her further down the tier list for the mid-patch update. Fiora is being targeted with a nerf for this patch, with her W attack speed slow being sliced in half, going from 50 to 25%. Nerfs will be more matchup dependent as to how much this will actually affect Fiora, but against champs like Jax, Tryndamere, or Trundle, she's definitely going to become a bit weaker. Hard to say exactly how impactful a change like this will be. We don't see it drastically reducing Fiora's overall power level, and with Ravenous Hydra buffed, that will help to lessen the blow of this nerf, so we'll be leaving Fiora in the S tier. Riot's making a change to Hullbreaker this patch so that its stacking and bonus damage are changed from on-attack effects to on-hit effects. This will reduce the strength of Hullbreaker on Urgot most significantly, so we may see him shy away from rushing the item moving forward. Black Cleaver buffs this patch are actually great for Urgot though, and he could just start rushing the item instead, so we still think the champion will be in a great spot, and you'll find Urgot in the top lane S tier. A few buffs and a couple of nerfs are headed Cassante's way for this patch, so let's have a look. Health is going up from 570 to 625. Base mana is being increased as well from 290 to 320. W armor and magic resist ratio is seeing a boost going from 50 to 85%. All-out Q will no longer slow targets. All-out W will no longer have a faster cooldown or cast time. Dash speeds on E are also being nerfed, going from 1700 to 900 for a normal dash, and from 1800 to 1500 when dashing to an ally. Overall, we're leaning towards these being net positive changes for Cassante, but not to an overwhelming extent. We can't see these changes moving the needle enough to warrant a rise of the tier list for Cassante, so he's going to remain in the top lane B tier. So, having a look at the top lane tier list, it's mainly going to be the indirect nerf to lethal tempo that shapes the meta, more so than the direct champion changes. OP tier will now be locked down by 3 champions, as we have Alawi, Garen, and Darius. With lethal tempo nerf for this patch, it's going to give indirect rise to the likes of Garen and Darius, coupled with the fact Stridebreaker is being buffed, and the priority of both champs will be on the rise. It's kind of weird that Riot just straight up nerfed lethal tempo like that when there was really only one lethal tempo top laner in a dominant spot. Trundle had been super strong for too long, so he's moving down to the top lane A tier, but champs like Jax, Tryndamere, and Yone really haven't been excelling in recent patches, and they'll only become weaker. Especially with Frozen Heart in as broken a spot as it is, the priority on Malphite and his ability to just hard counter these auto-reliant top lane champs will become even more disgusting. Malphite players in 14.3 who rushed Frozen Heart were winning 55% of the time, and that number is only going to rise due to these lethal tempo nerfs. There's just one jungler being directly changed in 14.4, and it's going to be Rek'Sai. Power is being shifted around a lot, but the changes are intended to be net buffs. Base health regen and health regen growth are both being reduced. Base movement speed is going up from 335 to 340. Fury generation against minions is being reduced by 50% so that top lane Rek'Sai does not become a menace. W unburrow damage is being reduced, but only at the later ranks. W unburrow will now have an 80% AP ratio as well. Unburrowed E cooldown is dropping from 12 to 10 seconds. The base damage on unburrowed E is being removed, however the total AD ratio is going from 75 to 100%, while you'll now have max health scaling on the max Fury proc from E. Burrowed E cooldown is being lowered by a ton, going from 26 seconds down to 18 at rank 1. Tunnel cooldown is also dropping from 10 to 6 seconds at rank 1. Lastly, our bonus AD ratio is being reduced from 175 to 100%. So overall, more strength being added on to Rek'Sai's E, while some damage is being taken off W and R. This should really enable Bruiser Rek'Sai to thrive a lot more, whereas any kind of glass cannon Rek'Sai where you build lethality won't be viable anymore. Meta build in recent patches has had Rek'Sai rushing Ghostblade, but that likely changes for 14.4, especially with Black Cleaver buff. The 2-item core of Titanic Hydra and Black Cleaver is set to take over. As for Rek'Sai's tier list placement, we expect the champion to be in a really strong spot throughout 14.4, so we're moving her into the jungle S tier. So if we have a look at the jungle tier list, it's mainly the indirect changes that will influence the bigger meta shifts. Lots of junglers like running lethal tempo, so it's going to be interesting to track just how impactful those nerfs pan out. With Terminus and Stridebreaker buffed in the same patch, it's Bel'Veth's time to take over the meta, and we're bumping her into the OP tier. Briar will be the other OP tier jungler, as she's going to benefit from this patch as well with the Black Cleaver changes. Nocturne is getting a small nudge down the tier list for 14.4 as a result of the lethal tempo nerfs. Even though the lethal tempo changes are nerfs early on, it will be interesting to see how they affect a jungler like Master Yi, who's not a skirmish heavy jungler in the early game. Could lethal tempo being buffed later on in the game actually be more beneficial for someone like Yi? It's tough to say, but the severity of the lethal tempo changes are likely to drastically vary based on which champion you're playing, especially for the lower ranks to where games tend to drag out and last longer. We wouldn't be surprised if the changes to lethal tempo actually boost Master Yi's win rate. Ahri has been one of the weaker mid lane champions for the first couple of patches this season, so Riot has a few small buffs planned. Health growth is up from 96 to 104. Q-AP ratio is going from 45 to 50%. We feel like Ahri still needs one more impactful change to really solidify herself back in meta as a top tier mid lane champion, so she'll remain in the B tier despite these buffs. Aurelion Sol turned into the most broken champion in the game after his 14.3 buffs, so Riot has no choice but to pull back a little in 14.4. Q bonus magic damage is dropping by 5 at all ranks, and the AP ratio is down as well, going from 35 to 30%. At first glance, or if you aren't super familiar with Aurelion Sol, 5 damage off Q may seem like a slap in the face kind of nerf. However, you have to realize this is 5 damage for each burst of Aurelion Sol Q. When Sol Q is active, you're able to get multiple bursts off, so over an extended fight, you're losing way more than just 5 damage. As a result of this nerf, we no longer see Aurelion Sol being the most broken mid laner for solo queue, and we'll be shifting him from OP into S tier. So with mid lane changes covered, here's how the mid lane tier list is shaping out, as we've got Twisted Fate and Kassadin taking control of the OP tier slot. Kassadin has been heavily indirectly buffed over the last 2 patches, with Archangels and Rod of Ages buffed in 14.3, and now with Archangels and Malignance buffed for 14.4. Cass was even arguably an OP tier mid last patch, so we expect these changes to really push him over the top. One other notable change to the mid lane tier list is Yone dropping from A into B tier. Lethal tempo nerfs will hurt the early game kill threat of Yone quite significantly, as losing attack speed for Yone is actually even more detrimental than for other champions, since it's not just attack speed he's losing, but a longer cooldown on Q as well. Other than that, there's nothing really too impactful going on with the mid lane meta in 14.4, so you can expect things to remain pretty similar to how they were in 14.3. Just one ADC being buffed for this patch, and no surprise to see it being Kai'Sa. Kai'Sa has held one of the lowest win rates for any ADC in recent patches, so Riot's giving her a small boost to her early game, with the range of her R being increased from 1500 to 2000. It's an alright buff, but it's not something that's even going to influence the strength of Kai'Sa in all of your games. R buff is not enough to move the needle in our eyes, so Kai'Sa is going to remain down in the ADC C tier for another patch. A nerf to Kalista is being issued for this patch due to her heavy presence in the pro scene right now. E base damage will be dropping by 10 at all ranks. There's a bug fix being patched, as well as Boots of Speed will now properly affect passive dash distance. We don't really see these changes doing a whole lot in shifting Kalista's solo queue strength, so you'll find her in the B tier once again. A very simple nerf is being issued to Varus, with his base AD dropping from 62 to 60. Similar to the previous ADC changes, just nothing that's significant, so we see no reason at all to shift Varus anywhere on the tier list. The last ADC being changed for this patch is Smolder. The number of Q missiles, while at 125 stacks, is being reduced from 2 plus 1% dragon practice stacks to 1 plus 1.5% dragon practice stacks. W cooldown is being adjusted, with the spell being weaker early on but buffed later. W base damage is lower early on but higher at max rank. W AD ratio is being changed from a total AD ratio to a bonus AD ratio, which is a nerf. W AP ratio is down as well from 35 to 20%. W explosion damage will now have a bonus AD ratio, and the AP ratio is going up from 65 to 80%. So overall, the main theme of these changes are to chop off some of Smolder's early game strength so that he's more punishable early on and doesn't just get to scale into a monster for free. The changes should negatively affect Smolder slightly, however, we don't see the nerfs being enough to warrant a push down the tier list, so we're going to be leaving Smolder in the ADC S tier. So for the ADC tier list, we've got some very clear-cut winners taking over the meta right now. As if Vayne wasn't already strong enough, she indirectly benefits from the Terminus buffs, so she's only becoming even better in 14.4. Twisted Fate has been the big talking point in the ADC role over the past patch, even being pulled out in the pro scene, and we're giving him a push into OP for 14.4. Usually when the play rate of a champion rises, you'll see a slight dip in the champion's win rate due to more inexperienced players picking up that champion, but with TF, it's been the opposite. Twisted Fate's play rate and win rate have both continued to rise, which is a big indicator of the champion being extremely powerful. Agency is a word you hear thrown around quite a lot when talking about the strength of a champion for solo queue, and TF just has way more agency than most traditional ADCs. You can set up ganks better than most, and you have better map impact than most, while still being able to output a ton of damage, so there's just so much to like about TF in the ADC role right now. 3 support champions will receive buffs in 14.4, and first up we have Lulu. Lulu's Q double hit damage is being increased from 25 to 50%, which actually adds a significant amount of damage to the spell. E damage is going up, but at the later ranks only, as it's being increased from 240 to 260 at max rank. E shield gets a small boost as well, with it going up by 5 at rank 1, and then by 25 at max rank. Definitely not changes that will suddenly push Lulu back to the top of the solo queue meta, but we see them being enough to warrant a push out of C tier and into B. The second enchanter who will be buffed for 14.4 is Soraka. Passive movement speed is going up from 70 to 90%. Q heal will be increased by 10 at all ranks. R cooldown is buffed as well, with 10 seconds being shaved off at all ranks. Some pretty nice Soraka buffs here, nothing too over the top, but Soraka will be sitting in a solid A tier position for this patch. Thresh has been underperforming quite heavily in recent patches, so Riot's looking to help him out. Armor is being increased from 28 to 31. E damage is going up, but at the later ranks only. Most low elo players max out their E second on Thresh, so this buff should end up being more low elo skewed and not as impactful for high elo, where players like to max W second. R cooldown is buffed quite significantly, with 20 seconds taken off at all ranks. Riot's been very conservative with their changes in 14.4, so once again these buffs won't be enough to push Thresh back to the top of the meta, but he will be moving up one tier, going from B into A. Bard is going to be hit pretty hard in 14.4, as he's being directly nerfed and then also negatively affected by the Bloodsong nerf. Just a lot less damage coming out of Bard, as passive base damage per 5 chimes is going down from 14 to 10. The AP ratio, however, is up from 30 to 40% to try and incentivize more offensive builds instead of tank. Q is being changed in a similar way, as the base damage is dropping, but the AP ratio is up, so a nerf to tank Bard, but not as bad of a change if you're playing him with an early Imperial mandate. A few base stat changes are being thrown in as well, with armor growth going from 5.2 to 5. The lone buff among all these changes is to Bard's attack speed, being increased from 0.625 to 0.658. So overall, these changes significantly nerf the strength of Frozen Heart into Kaenic Rookern on Bard. Much less damage coming out of him for 14.4, and we'll have to see how players adapt to this with their builds. Regardless of what new builds pop up, Bard is most definitely weaker for this patch, and we'll be dropping him down into the support A tier. Riot completely missed the mark with the 14.3 nerfs to Maokai, so they have another round ready for us in 14.4. Armor is going from 39 to 35. Q damage is being reduced by 5 at all ranks. Our root duration is also being lowered slightly. To be completely honest, guys, we just don't see this being enough to remove Maokai from the top of the support meta. Keep in mind the champion has had a 55% win rate throughout 14.3, and at the very most, we can see these nerfs dropping that by 2%. A 2% drop, though, still has Maokai at 53%, which is higher than all other supports in the game, so we'll be leaving Maokai in the OP tier despite these nerfs. Another support we've had rated very highly in recent patches being Zyra will be nerfed. Plant damage is being lowered, going from 20 scaling to 88 to 16 scaling to 84. Zyra jungle will actually be buffed though, with bonus monster damage being increased from 40 to 60 early on. Definitely not the end for Zyra support, so she'll be sticking around in the S tier for the time being. So for the complete support tier list, there will continue to be one champion who stomps all over everyone else in terms of priority, and that champion is Maokai. Camille's support is a really interesting pick that we'll be adding to the support tier list in 14.4. We've covered Camille's support a little bit in the past with some of our off-meta videos, and the champion is actually starting to see a lot more play in solo queue now. The early game kill threat with Hail of Blades is super nasty, and especially if you duo up with an ADC and can coordinate when you're looking to engage, the early kills can be of plenty. Definitely one of the better aggro carry supports that you can play right now, and she's being added to the support S tier. With all of the nerfs to the support item upgrades for this patch, we'll have to see how impactful that turns out as the patch hits live servers. In theory, melee supports and mage supports should be getting slightly weaker while enchanters are on the rise, but it's tough to say if the changes will really be enough to sway the meta and actually cause melee supports to drop in priority. All in all though, other than Bard dropping down and losing priority, not much else changes in the grand scheme of things for the support meta. If you truly want to improve and rank up fast, head on over to SkillCapped.com. We just finished a massive update adding all brand new courses for Season 14. We even upload 10 new Smurf commentaries each week where a challenger teaches you how to play every champion in the exact rank you're stuck in. And remember, you can try all this out risk-free. If you don't rank up while actively using SkillCapped, you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below to get the rank you've always wanted this season. So that's going to be all for our latest update on the solo queue tier list. Thanks for watching, everyone. Good luck in your games this patch, and we'll see you in the next one.